You still use the term significantly overvalued in your release. By what measures do you assess this, the overvaluation of the Swiss franc? Because the economy seems to be growing at a decent pace.
Well, the economy is only growing at 1.1%. This is below expectations and weaker than many other countries in the world at this moment. So if you look at all indicators, models that evaluate the Swiss franc, we see that overall the Swiss franc remains significantly overvalued, and this is the base for our judgment.
What do you think you can do to curb that overvaluation? I mean, for example, are further rate cuts still on the table?
Well, we do not exclude further rate cuts. We look at our inflation forecast, at the economic situation, and then, of course, we evaluate all our options, and then we see what kind of instruments we should take. So for the time being, we stick to our monetary policy with negative interest rates of minus 0.75%, and our willingness to intervene in the foreign exchange market if necessary.
How much more can you intervene in foreign exchange markets? You already have the third largest holding of foreign exchange reserves in the world. You've got a balance sheet, 120% GDP. I mean, how much further can you go in that direction?
Well, in that respective, there is no specific limit. So we do always a cost-benefit analysis, and as long as we are convinced that we have to influence monetary conditions through interventions or the combination of negative interest rates and interventions, we are willing to do that.
So you're nowhere near where the Fed is. They're starting to talk about actually unwinding their balance sheet. But I'm sure you've given some thought about how you would do that. How will that look in Switzerland?
Well, the situation is very different between other economies and Switzerland. So many countries in the Eurozone and also in the United States, the output gap is closed. This is not the case in Switzerland. So we have a negative output gap. We have inflation just at zero, slightly above zero, and we have this overvalued Swiss franc. So that's the reason why we have to continue with our expansionary monetary policy.
Why do you think we see such difficulty boosting inflation? What exactly is holding you back? Is it all about fuel prices? Is it telephone contracts? I mean, what is it?
Well, in Switzerland, you have one factor that is the exchange rate that weighed on the economy, but also had a big negative impact on inflation. So we had this appreciation, which was a drag on inflation, especially in 2015, 2016, which is now slightly or slowly going away. But still, inflation is very, very low. Output gap is negative, and that is exactly the reason why we have to continue with our monetary policy.
So if it's really all about the overvalued currency, why don't you just go far deeper into negative interest rates and intervene far harder into currency markets?
Well, we are convinced that the current policy makes a lot of sense. We have now an interest rate differential that is again in the right direction or with the right sign. Swiss rates are below euro rates, and we will continue this policy, but obviously we evaluate any possibilities in case we have a change regarding the economic outlook or the inflation outlook.
How important are other central banks to your strategy? I mean, specifically the ECB, how key is what they do to what you do?
Well, there are different things that are important here. First of all, the economic situation in the Eurozone is very important for us. If this situation improves, this has a big impact, positive impact on Switzerland. Then, of course, financial market conditions in the global financial markets, influenced also by central banks like the ECB and the Fed, have a big influence on global interest rates, and they again have a big impact, of course, on the exchange rate. In that respect, we look at those developments very carefully.
You seem fairly optimistic about the global growth situation, and yet so many economies are facing the same problems with inflation that you are. The figures out of the U.S. are disappointing. The super core figures in Europe are also very low. Why do you think that is?
Well, to some extent, this is a puzzle or conundrum. So we would expect that inflation should be higher, especially wage growth. We have many economies where output gap is closed, the labor market is in equilibrium, but nevertheless, we see almost no growth in nominal wages. And this is hard to explain at this moment. Maybe it takes some time until we see more wage growth. But in fact, this is kind of a conundrum that we do not see more higher inflation, more wage growth, especially in those economies where the output gap is closed and the labor market is in equilibrium.
Do you think the Phillips curve is broken, or do you still see a link between lower unemployment and wage inflation?
Well, I would not say that it is broken, but at the moment it's a little bit hard to explain. So we would expect that inflation should pick up, especially in those economies where we have full employment and a zero output cap.
Let me finally ask you about regulation and banks, since they're such an important part of the Swiss economy. You've said that there are further steps to take in regulating the resolution process to solve the too big to fail problem. What are those further steps that you need to take for Swiss banks?
Well, it's important to see that all regulation is in place. So the banks are in the process of fulfilling all the requirements. They are on course in that. So that means capital, liquidity, but also, of course, resolution. So they are really on time, but they still need to do some of the work really to finalize all the requirements of that regulation.
Are we going to be able to finalize Basel III anytime soon?
It's a hard question for the moment. The negotiations are still ongoing, but I'm hopeful that we can finalize Basel III.
Is everybody participating? Is the U.S. at the table as well?
Of course, everybody, all the countries that are member of the Basel Committee are on the table, and I'm still hopeful that we can finalize it, hopefully in the course of this year.